Welcome to the Up-Level Dairy Podcast Young Leaders Series. Today I share with you a panel of 3 dairy leaders who joined me at World Dairy Expo for the National Dairy Shrine Young Professionals Luncheon. Hear about their paths and the lessons they learned along the way with Rachel Coyne Kurth, Jared Dueppengiesser, and Nick Randle.
Welcome everyone, Peggy.
All right, thank you, Mike. And let me just say that the excitement and enthusiasm that I'm able to bring forth to the dairy industry is not for my own attributes, but to those that are willing to share their stories through the Up-Level Dairy podcast, and including 3 people that we have joining us today who have also been so kind and generous with their time to share their stories with you today. And speaking of stories, as we get started today, I'm going to tell you a little story. There we go. Okay, so this gentleman in the picture here, some of you might know, might look a little familiar, but his name is Tom. This is my friend Tom. He's about 80 years old, and I got a chance to visit with Tom last week in preparation for speaking with you guys today. And I got to just sit down with this man who's been in the dairy industry for 80 years and talk about his path. And so let me tell a little bit about Tom's story. So Tom grew up in Pennsylvania, Penn State grad. Are my Penn State grads? Or Penn State students? Yes, he's one of your own. So I grew up in Pennsylvania, went to Penn State, majored in agriculture education, and went on to be a high school teacher in the special ed department, and decided that, you know what, working 8 hours a day wasn't enough. He said, what am I going to do with the rest of my hours? So he went back to the family farm, and he was teaching, and he was working on his family dairy farm in Pennsylvania. And while he was teaching, he met his wife, Judy, and the two of them eventually decided that what they really, truly wanted to do was for him to leave teaching and to be full-time dairy farmers. Well, let's keep going with the story here. So Tom and his wife, Judy, ended up having 4 sons. And they became one of the most progressive dairy farms in Pennsylvania. I say this because they actually got an award called the most progressive dairy farm in Pennsylvania back in the 70s, 80s, somewhere around that time. But here's what else happened. Is that as their 4 boys decided that they also wanted to have a path in the dairy industry, specifically in dairy farming, they realized that they weren't in the place that was conducive for that. They realized that the family farm that had been in his family for 100 years was not the location, was not the place that would take his 4 boys and their families into the future. So Tom set out on a quest. He started doing his research. He got out a map of the United States, and he started looking at that map, looking at where federal milk marketing orders lie, looking at where he could optimize his income over feed costs for the long term. And as he looked at this map and also looked at where is the space and the place that will give my family the best opportunity for the future, he landed in Northwest Kansas. 25 years ago, they packed up their bags from Pennsylvania and moved to a little town in the middle of nowhere in Kansas. And so they started out with about 700 cows on that little farm, and his boys were able to come into that operation. And eventually, what happened, some of my pictures did not pop up, but you can see an important one right here. So this is just one of a few photos today of McCarty Family Farms. Anybody heard of McCarty Family Farms? Yeah, and maybe you know the story of McCarty Family Farms and how they got their start and how they ended up in Kansas. And what happened as they started going down this path of securing their future in the dairy industry, it was at first a 700 cow dairy in Rexford, Kansas. It became a dairy at multiple sites throughout Northwest Kansas. It became a dairy in Salina, Ohio. Ohio State, the Ohio State. Yep, you know what I'm talking about, right? What's the dairy? MVP, yep, MVP in Ohio. And now includes a milk condensing plant that they built right next to their original site, right next to the home where they had moved their family in Kansas. And that milk condensing plant is what allowed them to embark on an incredible partnership to secure their future with Danone, or as you commonly know around here, Dan and Yogurt, right? You guys know, maybe you've heard the story, maybe it's familiar to you, but what really stuck with me when I had a chance to sit down with Tom not long ago was not just the story, but the what ifs. And I couldn't help but wonder, what if Tom said to himself years ago, I have a degree in agriculture education. I can't do something else. That's all I can ever do. That's the only path I can go on. What if Tom said, I can't leave 100 years of my family tradition on this soil here in Pennsylvania and didn't go to Kansas? What if Tom had said that my fears of the future and what could happen, what other people might think, might outweigh my own drive and passion and desire to do what's best for my family, my boys, our farm, and the impact we could have? What if he didn't push those limits and push those boundaries on his own path? And if he hadn't, this place wouldn't be here today. And this, in fact, is the newest site of McCarty Family Farms. What you see right there are two 5,000 cow dairies back to back, 120 stall rotary parlors on either end, and the newest addition on this end here, the Judy McCarty Dairy Learning Center, in honor of Judy, a former teacher, and her love and passion for sharing dairy with the community. And this story right here, think about this. Tom, 80 years old, and he can reflect back on the timeline and the path that brought him to where he's at, and how that also set up a path for his family and for others to be a part of their organization and to have a future in the dairy industry. And now I know it might be difficult to think about your life when you're 80 years old, right? How are we in this room? A lot of us in our 20s, early 20s, are the students, right? It might be difficult to think about, what does your 80-year-old life look like, right? What does your 80-year-old path to where you're going to be then look like? And I understand that's a challenge. So that is why today, my goal in the time that we have together is to share with you a few other people's paths. And I have these three panelists that are joining me this afternoon to share their stories and their paths and the steps that they have taken for their careers in the dairy industry. And our hope is that you're able to learn from their experiences and you're able to push your own limits on what you believe is possible for you today, next year, 5 years from now, and when you're 80 years old. And so, please join me in welcoming our three panelists today. And let me introduce you quickly to our panelists. So we have first Miss Rachel Coyne Kurth, and Rachel comes to us from Minnesota today. And she is a key account manager for the MILC group, which provides software solutions for dairy producers. She and her husband, Chandler, have run Kurth Haven Farms, where they breed, raise, and show registered Holsteins. And in fact, they have some of those registered Holsteins right here at World Dairy Expo this year. And she was an active 4-H member and junior Holstein member, and also a former collegiate judge herself from the University of Minnesota. And now she has spent her last few years in various marketing roles before landing at the MILC Group, and she enjoys coaching youth dairy judging and is also a graduate of the Class 12 of the Young Dairy Leaders Institute. And alongside Rachel, we have Jared Dueppengiesser. Now, Jared grew up in New York as a Cornell University graduate and spent the good chunk of his career with the MILC Source Group, which we'll be hearing more about as well. But he recently made a change in his career path. And that took him to Acepsis, which is a Wisconsin-based animal health company focused on the development of chlorine dioxide technologies within a wide range of agriculture hygiene applications. And rounding out our third panelist on the end here is Mr. Nick Randle. And Nick is a senior marketing lead for Zoetis for dairy productivity and milk quality. He resides in Massachusetts with his wife, Ashley. Now, he's originally from Indiana, but also a Cornell grad. I should have planned that better. Put two Cornell people up here. But Nick has some pretty strong ties to the dairy industry. Not only that he works in, but that he's been in for his life as well, including his family that has exhibited through Starlight Genetics and exhibited and owned several All-American cattle, winning numerous championships and breeder awards. And who are my red and white Holstein breeders in the group? Anybody out here? Nick is also the president of the Red and White Association and a member of the Holstein Board of Trustees. And so these three individuals are the ones that, when I thought about who would best be positioned to serve you today, they were the three that came to my mind. And what you're about to find out is that they each have a little bit of different path. They're reaching a little bit different stage on those paths, but they have some powerful things that they can share with you today that I hope you're able to take home with you. And so take some notes, take some pictures, and let's get ready to dive in with Rachel, Jared, and Nick. All right, and to get us started out today, what I'm going to have the three of you do is each just provide a snapshot. I want you to go back to when you were in their seats and tell a little bit of a story of where your career has taken you from when you were a student to where you're at now. And Rachel, would you like to start?
Hello. I had the mic in my seat, so I get to talk to you guys first. So when I was sitting kind of where you guys are at now, I graduated in 2020, which was a really fun year to graduate because there were really no jobs, obviously, with COVID. But thinking back to my senior year, I really had no idea what I was going to do. I went to the University of Minnesota, as Peggy mentioned. I studied animal science with an emphasis in dairy production, but really knew that maybe going back onto a farm wasn't going to be my path, so I just looked into various roles. And I ended up at a company called AHV in a marketing role, and I was there for about a year. And then shifted to another animal health company called Axiota and spent about a year and a half in a marketing role there as well. And then, as Peggy mentioned, I was in YDLI class 12, and I got to YDLI and I decided I did not want to work in marketing anymore after listening to a lot of my classmates, hearing their stories and what they were doing in their roles. And so then last November I started looking for a different role, and I found a wonderful sales role with a company called MILC Group based out of California. So I have made a lot of career changes within the last 4 years, but really landed at a role I'm really appreciative of now.
Thank you, Rachel. And Jared.
Yeah, so I've kind of been a little bit all over the place as far as where I've lived. New York and Wisconsin. So we grew up on a family dairy in New York, 1,200 cows. And on my sophomore year of college, I did an internship with Milk Source in Michigan. And after that experience, I realized I either want to be part of their culture or if I'm on the dairy of our own, I really want to mimic that culture. And we can get into that more. But we had to make the difficult decision, were we going to continue dairying in New York where we were at, or were we going to sell? We wanted to grow. We needed to grow in order to stay competitive. But I'm sure there's many of you in this room that know growing up on a family dairy is not always the easiest thing. I mean, there's a lot of differences in opinions and who makes the final call. So that's something to think about. It's can you see yourself in this role for the next, for life? And it doesn't have to be, but if you're going to jump into that, you got to really have to give it your all there. So we ultimately decided, with the differing opinions of what the future of our dairy looked like, that we ended up selling our dairy in 2018. From there, I took a position with Milk Source and ultimately was managing Rosendale Dairy, 10,000 cow dairy in Wisconsin for 6 years. Recently, just in May, moved back to New York. My wife and I made that decision because we eventually want to start a family of our own, and I realized watching my brother try to raise brother and wife try to raise 4 little ones, all under 4 years old, that is a big task. So, I don't have any on the ground yet, but I do know, I know what it's going to take, and I don't want to be behind on that. So, with that being said, we have a great relationship with the team at Milk Source still. We show with them still. It was a very difficult decision leaving there. I mean, I was dragging my feet for a year and eventually just had to had to make the move. And now I work with Acepsis, which is a company based out of Wisconsin. Became familiar with that because we use their product on the dairies that I was working on. So I'm not really a good sales guy. That's not my thing. But if I'm going to sell something, number one, I have to believe in it. I have to know it works. I have to be passionate about it. So I went into this role focusing on milk quality because that was a huge focus of what I was doing at Rosendale. So this really fit in really well, and it also allowed me to keep coming back to Wisconsin and tied that all in.
Thank you, Jared. And Nick?
So I'm the old guy in the group, so I've got a few more years on these two. So I graduated from Cornell in 2013. As Peggy stated, I grew up in central Indiana. First one from my family to go to college, probably the first one to move that far away from home. And I actually saw last week on Facebook, one of the good things, I guess, about social media, right, is that it reminds you of things you were doing in the past. 12 years ago last week, I was applying for vet school. Obviously, I'm not a veterinarian, but it gave me a lot of thought in what I wanted to do, and so I started out as an intern for Zoetis in South Dakota, and that turned into a role there for 9 months in their genetics department. I got a sales territory in Ithaca, New York, so I moved back to Ithaca. And I remember that conversation vividly with my first manager out there when he had asked me, like, hey, got this opening, would love for you to come out there. And I said, I don't know if I'm ready to go back to Ithaca yet. And he asked me, well, why is that? And I said, I literally just left college, and I'm pretty sure I'll get back to my college thought, and that's probably not good for a professional. But it was a great transition. I did 5 years in the sales territory there, a little different than Rachel, who did the opposite thing. So I had a sales territory that actually covered Jared's old farm. And when I was the YDLI Class 10 graduate, figured out that marketing is where I wanted to go next. And so now I've been in our marketing group on the dairy side for the last 6 years. At Zoetis, been with Zoetis the whole time. I love the culture that we have. It's been a lot of changes, I would say, from our leadership perspective, but honestly, everybody that comes in always has a really great viewpoint on how we should look at the industry as a whole, and that's why I stay here. I started out just as our genetics marketer, and then they added reproduction and milk quality onto my role over the last few years. Still very much involved in the dairy industry from a lot of different perspectives. My wife and I still own cattle. We moved to Massachusetts because my wife is a lot more important than I am. You guys will figure this out. So she actually is the Commissioner of Agriculture for our state in Massachusetts. She's here this week. She was with Rachel and I doing official duty for the judging contest yesterday, and she's actually here with NASDA, so it's the group that all the ag commissioners belong to, for a delegation with Indonesia. So I'm just here as like arm candy for a lot of those things, and I'm not great from that perspective, I guess. I just keep my mouth shut, it's not in my head. But I will say that, the vet side of things, like, yes, that's where I wanted to go. That was my plan. One of our past leaders is the one that actually convinced me to turn down vet school and stick with them. So I think the biggest thing from all of this is that a lot of changes can happen. There's a lot of pathways, right, that we'll get to, and it's definitely not the one you really think you're going to be on.
Thank you, Nick. And as you just shared, we've heard the beginnings of 3 different paths, from going from marketing into sales, going from almost applying to vet school, almost on the path to be a veterinarian, into marketing, and Jared's path from being a manager on the dairy to now being on that sales and support side. And so 3 different paths, and hopefully there's a little bit in each of those paths that you can connect to, and we're going to connect it even more. And what I'd like to invite 3 of you now to do is to really look back over the last 5 years and just reflect for a moment and share what was the biggest challenge you faced in those first 5 years. help our students that are in this group relate to the things that they might be starting to run into and the challenges that could potentially come their way too.
So I'm still within those 5 years, like I said earlier. I graduated in 2020. So as you heard, I did switch roles a lot, and that was a challenge in itself because, like I said, when I was in college, I really didn't know what I was going to do. And then kind of naturally fell into marketing roles because I was good at photography, I was good at writing, and so I just really had a natural gift for that. But it wasn't something that was really fueling me and making me excited to get up in the morning. And so I did switch roles quite a bit. I definitely faced those challenges of, in my first job, I got hired and a month later, the CEO was asked to leave the company. So you get a whole new different boss, right? A month into your first career. You might run into things like a boss or a manager that you're struggling with, coworkers that are, a challenge. Those are things that, you might hear about, but until you really experience them and have to kind of get through those challenges and figure out what is the path through them, those are things that you just have to get through based on experience. And then another thing that I think is important that we've kind of touched on and we'll touch on quite a bit more is just, again, knowing that the path, like Nick mentioned, that you think you're going to be on is probably not where you're going to go. That certainly is, I really never thought I would end up in a sales role and loving it. And so I just think that when you think about where you're sitting now, don't get so focused on where you have to go and where you think you have to go, because you are the one that gets to decide that in the end. And today you could be going right and tomorrow you could be going left, and that's okay. It's really okay to make changes as you see fit. I guess one addition to that too is people will kind of get into that, I did 3 internships in college, and a lot of those people that I worked for in my internships and rode along with said, oh, I did an internship here in college and I have worked here now for 42 years, or I've worked here for 26 years. So I kind of thought, okay, I have to get a job and I have to stay there. And that is not what has happened, and it has been okay. And people might tell you, you have to stay at a job for a year, you have to stay there for at least 2 years. Stay there until you're not happy, and then make the change and find what's going to make you happy.
Oh, Rachel, hold the mic for a second. Hold the mic. What was the moment when you decided that it was okay for you to let go of that expectation that you put upon yourself that you needed to stay somewhere for 20 or 40 years, and that it was okay to make those changes?
I think that comes a lot from just watching the people around me, and a lot of my friends who are a little bit older, my siblings. I've watched especially my siblings switch even career paths, start their own businesses, make changes, and looking to those people around me, I guess as I got back into reality, from going to those internships, thinking, okay, you get the job offer from your internship, you stay there forever, and then you die. As I actually watched the people around me and my friends and those who were just a little bit older than me, I noticed that, hey, they're switching jobs or they're making changes, and it is okay to do that. You don't have to do what maybe the generation before us always did.
Thank you. And Jared, how about you? Biggest challenge you faced professionally in the past 5 years?
Yeah, so I think that when I only had to worry about making it to class by 10 a.m. on a Friday, and then you go from that to managing a dairy of that size with, you're the only one that's responsible for 50 to 60 employees, and you're out of college, that's a big thing to undertake. And it's really, truthfully, it's not something that you're going to be able to learn firsthand in college. You're not. I mean, you learn so much from internships, and they're extremely important. And I'm taking nothing away from the education that you get there, but the firsthand you know, this is yours now, you're responsible for this. You can't learn that, unless you're right in it. So I'd say for me, the biggest challenge was having a vision of what, when I took over as manager there, having a vision for what I wanted the culture to look like and what my goals were and what I wanted to achieve. How am I going to get 50 plus other employees on that same trajectory? That's a huge undertaking. So what I really had to do was just start from ground zero and build up and explain the importance of everything that we were doing, you know, whether it was milk quality, cow comfort, you name it, and really explain the importance of all of that and explain the why behind everything. Why are we doing this? What's the reason why prep in the parlor is so important? If it's just seen as just go out there and do this and stand in that position and keep that filled, really you're not going to get anywhere. So really explaining the importance of all that in each step to the employees, you get so much better buy-in. And through that there's challenge, and the challenge is there's going to be employees that they don't want to change, and they don't want to, they just don't see the importance of making that switch, and ultimately those employees are going to have to move on. And that was really tough for me, as you know, just coming out of college, to have to remove employees and terminate employees, and that's not a good feeling, because you want to give, I gave people the benefit of the doubt to a fault, and it sometimes came back to bite me, but I learned a lot from that. There's a point where they're going to change, they're going to believe in it, they're going to switch, and I think that was a huge challenge, just being so young and doing that at that age.
Oh, and Jared, you did it so well, and you learned it. And in fact, if any of you here ever listened to a Level Dairy podcast, and if you haven't, make sure you follow it right now. And just grab your phone, follow it, and I want to take you all the way back to episode 1. Because episode 1, when I launched up Level Dairy podcast, was with Jared talking about this very topic. And so that's where you can find even more about what he did as a manager to really have a vision for that culture and to develop that culture. And this was the bridge between what you learned as an intern about cows and about the systems, about management, what you learned in school, as you said, the curriculum and the education, and the learning that never stopped when your next challenge to overcome was how to create culture and improve performance and retain people. And I'm going to brag for you that you talked about the challenges of learning all of that, but one of the greatest feathers that you can wear in your hat from your time as a manager at Milk Source at Rosendale Dairy was that you went a very long time without losing any employees once you got that culture set. And so when we did the podcast, it was 6 months, but it was beyond that, right?
Yeah, that took a long time to get there, and I made a lot of mistakes before we made it to that point, and certainly there's a healthy level of turnover, and you know, at some point it's just not going to work out for a certain hire, but it's super costly. Turnover is extremely costly, and just seeing the improvement in our quality of work once we got to that point, to no turnover for a really long time, it just really turned into a great culture there.
Thanks, Jared. And Nick, biggest challenge for you in the past 5 years?
I'm going to do a little bit of a two-parter, so first 5 and the last 5, I guess.
Good call. Good call, old guy.
That's right. So, you know, the first 5, honestly, and both of them have a little bit of a personal touch to me. The first 5 is really learning how to change the relationships you have with friends, to be honest. Especially when you enter into an industry you've been in for years. You go back to an area, right, that you attended school with a lot of these people, and we're all in the same stage of moving into either managing their farms or an adjacent business that you work with, and really the biggest thing is trying to figure out how to work together that's not related to the friendship. Because at the end of the day, there are still things you have to separate that and be like, okay, this is business to business, and understand there are things that we're probably gonna do that are not what we would do to each other as friends, not from like a vindictive thing, but literally just, it's a negotiation situation. And those were challenging, like a first 18 months, I would say, in this role. On the back half here, or I guess the forward part of what we got going on, a lot of my challenge in these last 5-6 years, honestly, has been around time commitment and what you want to do in your career. I am very thankful for the spouse that I have, and that the fact that she deals with a lot of the same things that I have in terms of being gone a lot. There's a lot of schedule coordination that goes down, and we understand that in the future of children, it's going to get worse. But learning it now has been great. The first 2 years in this marketing role, I actually had an apartment down in New Jersey, and we had our house in Massachusetts that we just moved to. I had to work from New Jersey every week, 4 days a week, and then I would come home on the weekends, basically. That was a challenge, but we both knew that that was what had to be done, especially with her moving into her new role as deputy commissioner, and then myself moving into my new role. It's probably the biggest positive that came out of COVID that anybody would ever see, but the fact that I didn't have to do this after 2021. But that's something that we, experience in a lot of our lives, and I think probably even within the first 5 years, just things like that too. That's, you set your goals of where you want to go in your career, you got to figure out what is it worth sacrificing. There's a lot of things that's just not worth it, and that's where you got to figure out that pathway. I think that's where Rachel was talking about changing your mindset of where you think you're going to go and where you end up, and it really comes down to what's more important. And there's a lot of things in your career that are, and there's a lot of things that honestly end up being not important.
And those things change, right, Nick?
Definitely change.
Yeah.
Yes.
And thank you for adding that layer. As I positioned this question, it was professionally, right? What challenges have you faced? But I think what we've all probably come to learn in our own careers is that your personal life and your professional life, they aren't separate from each other. One impacts the decisions of the other. And as Nick had mentioned, it's really defining what your priorities are. And not just today, but in the future, even as Jared had mentioned too, as he looks at the future of his wife and them having their own family as well. So thank you for your honesty in sharing those challenges. And the next question that I have for you relates a little bit more back to really your student experiences. And so, sorry. So my question for you is, when you look back on your student experiences, and even back again in those first few years, what was the most beneficial action that you took that you believe set you up for success?
I'd say as a student, trying out as many different career paths that I thought I wanted to be a part of. I'll tell you, when I first went to college, I thought I was going to be a surgeon, to be honest. Like, that was my initial thing. Going through the next 4 years and taking internships within hospitals, and then I kind of thought, well, maybe there's something I want to do within research, so I had a research internship the next summer, and then obviously leading into vet school and what have you. Those different things gave me an insight into what aspects I did enjoy, but then confirmed, hey, this is not exactly what I want to do. Professionally, honestly, a lot of that comes around finding those different opportunities for leadership and continuing education. Rachel and I have talked about YDLI, and Jody Wendowski's here, who was a part of that with us. And it's something that truly did change myself. Obviously, it changed both of our career paths in terms of what we ended up doing. But those types of things are huge when it comes to deciding how much you want to be involved in a certain step in your career. And I think that that's ultimately what leads to our success and what we do every day is learning from everybody else that's around us, but also knowing which parts you want to take and hold, and which parts you're like, yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but that's just not for me. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing for me is keep finding ways to learn. Like, even when you're out of college, none of us know everything. You find new ways of interacting with people that have a different skill set than you do, or even just, working with other folks that maybe have something that you might be interested in the future.
Thanks, Nick. And Jared, how about you? Most impactful action that you took, especially as a young student or young professional in those first couple of years?
Yeah, with that, I think all of ours are gonna sound maybe a little similar, but the importance of internships. I did an internship, a different internship every year that I was in college. So with that, there's no such thing as a bad internship because you can learn so much at the, I don't want this to sound bad, but you're learning at the expense of somebody else. And even if it's a poor, what you considered a poor internship or not what you expected, I think that's still really beneficial to learn from that, because I had one of those and it wasn't great, but I realized, okay, well, I don't want to do that. So it helps you narrow things down to figure out what you want to do. And then just lastly, I really have seen, and probably even more so in the last few years, as we were making a change, the importance of relationships with people and really investing the time to meet people, put yourself out there, talk to people, as many people as you can, and just learn about what they are doing, because I have learned that has came back and connected as I started looking for what my next career path was going to be. Truthfully, I didn't do a lot of searching. A lot of the people that I had met had contacted me and just wanted to follow up and chat and see what opportunities there were out there. So as many people as you can meet and have conversations with, I think it's really important.
Yeah, not to sound like a broken record, but internships are huge. I am the youngest of three, and I grew up in a household where I felt like there was an expectation that you were going to have 3 internships, at the very minimum 2. But my added layer to that is that I really wanted to get out location-wise and go see different things. So the summer after my freshman year of college, I packed up a car and I went to Florida and I worked on a 10,000 head dairy. I still to this day believe that's the best thing that I have ever done in my life. I think that was the most fun summer I've ever had and the most I've ever learned. And I was, essentially isolated myself away from my friends that I had just made in college, anybody that I went to high school with. All of my friends had gone back home for the summer. And I had moved to Florida for the summer. And then on the next summer I went and I did an internship in Connecticut, very much the same scenario. And then my 3rd summer I did an internship kind of based all over the Midwest, but was still doing quite a bit of traveling around. And so I guess, just what I'm getting at with that is making sure that, yes, you're using those internships as ways to learn and ways to find what career path you might like, but also using them as time to go find a new experience, that was maybe more fulfilling personally too. I mean, I loved going and living in Florida for a summer. I loved going and living in Connecticut for a summer. And so doing those things that really push you out of your comfort zone, but can also be really good learning opportunities as well.
Thank you for sharing that. So really we're hearing a lot about internships and just pushing yourself to have different experiences where you get these glimpses of what your life could be like, whether it was potentially being a surgeon or a vet, internships where you learned what you didn't like, and internships where you got 3 months to experience things that you loved every minute of. And just curious, who's done an internship in this room? Oh, look at these rock stars. Awesome. Okay, who's looking for internships for next year? Anybody find one today in Career Connections this morning? almost on the way. Hopefully, fingers crossed. We'll get you guys hooked up. And hey, don't be afraid to hit these three up for some of their internship opportunities that they may know of through their connections as well. Because as Jared said, it's all about those connections and knowing people and networking. And you have 3 new friends that you can ask those questions to. I guess 4. I can be one too. But the next question that I have for you is just building a little bit off what you shared. So we talked about these, internships, the value of that, the experiences, the mentorships. But I'm going to relate this one back a little bit to something that I felt personally as I left college and entered the work world, the career world. So tell me if anybody else can relate to this. So when you are in high school and growing up, FFA kids, who's my FFA kids? 4-H kids? Yep, Brief Association kids, quite a bit, right? And then you get to college, and you're able to do a lot of those things until you're 21 years old or so. And in college, then you have even more things that come your way through different groups and organizations. And then you graduate, and maybe you work for a company that those things are built into your training and curriculum, but maybe you don't. So that was something that I bumped into early in my career, and I realized that if those paths weren't clear from your employer, but you still want them, you gotta go get them yourself. And so I'm curious from the 3 of you, what are some of the resources that you have tapped into? What are some of the tools that have helped you to continue to develop yourselves personally and professionally and as leaders? Because that's what the 3 of you are. You are leaders in this industry. And so what have you been tapping into? I know we touched on YDLI, so if there's more you want to add on that end, go for it. But what else? Rachel?
Well, we've talked about YDLI quite a bit. We probably haven't explained what YDLI is. So Nick and I both completed this program. It's called the Young Dairy Leaders Institute. Holstein Association USA puts it on, but really it's open to anybody that has a connection to dairy or works within the dairy industry. You certainly don't have to have Holsteins or registered cattle or anything for that matter. But it's a program where you go and essentially in 3 phases. You go meet with your class in person, and there's anywhere from 40 to 100 young adults with you. And you are going and learning your personalities, you're learning other people's personalities and how to work with other types of personalities, different cultures. You're learning about what career paths are out there, what other people are doing around you. I, in my YDLI class, had several people who work in checkoff and politics and do things like that I had no knowledge of, really. I mean, I know that there are people campaigning for dairy, but I didn't really know who those people were. So you get to meet people like that. So really a phenomenal program. I can't say enough about good things about it. And obviously it was really impactful on both Nick and I. But that is a program. There are other programs like that as well. So those extra kind of continuing education pieces that you can do as a young adult. I know that there's other agricultural groups that put on things like that as well. Peggy's podcasts are a great resource. I love to listen to any and all up-level dairy podcasts and other podcasts within the industry because you'll listen to the guests that she has on, and you'll be able to pull tidbits from them as they tell their stories. And then another thing is just reading those leadership books, reading those, even if you read one that you don't get a ton out of, if you get something out of it, it's been worth your time, or audiobooks or whatever it might be, webinars, podcasts, all of those. We live in a world where there's a lot of resources for us and they're really easy to get at. And so if you are a sales rep and you're driving down the road and you have the ability to turn those things on, go for it, do it instead of, listening to music for once.
Rachel, favorite read recommendation? Audio book or book that you've read, leadership related topics? Anyone that really stuck out?
My favorite one that I have read is called Creativity Inc. And I can't remember the guy's name, but it was written by a man who ran Pixar. And so he talked about the culture at Pixar and how they built that. He and Steve Jobs really together doing that, and just being able to sit and see how, Pixar, Disney is a huge, huge entity, and so being able to see how, people outside of the dairy industry specifically are able to run businesses in huge, multi-million, billion-dollar industries is really interesting.
Great, thank you. And Jared?
Yeah, Rachel kind of stole my thunder on that one with the plug for the podcast, but I truthfully, I think it's a great podcast because it gives you so much insight from people from all over and so many different experiences. Peggy's not paying us to say this, but it's true. She really brings a lot to the table, and I think it's super beneficial. And something that I'm part of that goes along with that, I'm in a group of dairy leaders from across the United States. There is a process that we go through to get into this group, and you have to continue to participate and give input in order to stay in the group. I don't need to go into full detail about that, but the thing that I love about it is that it's peers, close in age, that we're all really kind of dealing with the same, similar things. So you don't have to be in a fancy group in order to get this exposure. I mean, pick 10 friends that they know 10 different people, and you really can just have an easy resource of communication between people that are all doing the same thing at the same time, around the same age, and you'll see the similarities and challenges and experiences and bounce those ideas off of each other. And it's really an enjoyable group to be part of. We travel across the U.S. to different locations to get exposure to different areas and see the differences in what the dairy industry looks like in all different areas. So getting yourself in groups can be super beneficial.
Thanks, Jared. Oh, Jared, do you have a book recommendation? I know you're a reader.
Well, I'm really not a book reader. I fall asleep if I do that. So,
whatever, you told me 2 books. You told me 2 books that were very impactful
yeah, well, I
for
listened
you.
to them.
Whatever, close enough.
So I don't know if these are exactly the 2 that I told you, but I really love the book Good to Great. That's a book that I really recommend for everybody here to read. And what was the other one?
Jeff Kurth.
Oh,
Kurth.
Giving your employees crap.
Crap.
Yep.
It's an acronym.
Yeah.
It's an acronym.
Yeah.
And it's not even a dairy book.
Care, respect, appreciation, and praise. So he goes into what that means and how you do it. And they're both really, really good books that I recommend reading or listening to.
Thanks, Jared. And Nick, how about you?
So I guess the first 2 things fall on, right? YDLI, awesome. Great plug for us there. We obviously not getting paid to say that either. The podcast of Peggy's, absolutely. And I'm someone that actually pays Peggy for stuff, so I'm just gonna tell you that it is a great podcast. We may have spent a few days last week, obviously in Kansas, putting some of this stuff together. So, from my standpoint, I'm very fortunate that I work for a company that is highly focused on learning and development. Every year I have the opportunity to take what my goals and my aspirations are for my career and put a plan together and say, hey, this is what I want to improve upon. And there hasn't been anything yet that they've turned down, and the costs have been pretty high. I'm pretty fortunate that I have a school near me that probably Jared and I would both say is a safety school compared to Cornell. It's called Harvard. So it's actually a really nice thing that it's close to me, and they have a lot of continuing education, weekly course type things that we can go through. So I've taken advantage of a lot of those. There's a lot of things online as well that I've done from different certificate programs on leadership and global strategy. But I think that's the biggest thing for me is working for a company that supports me, and it makes it really easy. It's not something that's a challenge of trying to figure out, how am I going to afford this or what am I going to do? Also, if I wanted to get another degree, they are more than happy to help with that funding. So pretty much the same as the other two, though. Really, it's finding those different classes that make sense to you and are going to challenge you.
And Nick, do you have a book recommendation?
I'm very much like Jared.
It's fine if they're
it's
audio.
It's very hard, so I have to listen to things. But what got you here won't get you there. It's one of the books that I really appreciate. I'm not sure if this is really a leadership type of book, but it's one of the ones I actually did read recently, which was Green Lights, which is a Matthew McConaughey book. It was really good. So.
Awesome.
Apparently they didn't teach us how to read it.
Yeah, we're not good at reading apparently. Yeah.
But it sounds like you're excellent listeners.
Yeah, we're very good listeners.
Yes. All right, so I want to switch gears for a moment and give you an opportunity to speak to our students in the room and our young professionals about what you look for when your company is making new hires. And so this is your opportunity in this room to get access to what is it that Rachel's company at MILC Group, Jared at Acepsis, Nick at Zoetis, what are you looking for when you're speaking with students this age, as far as students that are interested in being a part of your team, working for your company? A couple things you're looking for, and maybe a piece of advice that you could offer to help. How can they set themselves apart when they have a desire to work for your company?
So I'm pretty fortunate that I actually have one of our past interns in the room. So from our standpoint, a lot of it comes down to a lot of what we were just talking about. Are you hungry to learn? And are you going to actually go out there and be a self-starter? We don't believe in being micromanaging with anybody. We're not going to be laying out a plan of like, hey, here's everything you need to go do and the tasks that you need to check off the list. We believe that you are interviewing for this role because you truly want it. You have a desire to make change within the company, and we will set you up for success, but ultimately it comes down to you and whether or not you get there. Everybody I work with, all of our leaders, they're absolutely there to help you and try to guide you down the path that makes the most sense, but in reality, it's kind of up to you and how you forge your path. I would say the biggest thing as a piece of advice for anyone, when you're in that interview scenario, bring something that you feel like, hey, sets me up to be different in terms of what experience I have. And it can be anything. It doesn't have to even be related to the job itself. And I think that's the thing that people get always hung up on when we're interviewing people, is that they're trying to find what's those things that just connect right to the specific job. Because the reality of it is, a lot of the day, you're probably not going to be doing what your exact job is. There's going to be other things that you're going to get pulled in for that we know you have a talent. We're going to ask you to help guide that. And I think of one of my colleagues that was one of our recent hires in the marketing group. With his past experience, I actually gave him a part of my job. And it was more so because he knows exactly how to position it extremely well, but it has nothing to do with his job, honestly, at the end of the day. Like he's very much focused on our field team and making sure our marketing plans fit specifically in those regions. But this, honestly, has really nothing to do with it. But I know he's excellent at it, and it's something he enjoys, and it's a passion. So I give that to him, and he has done excellent with it. So find those things that you're like, hey, I am really passionate about this. Here's something I've done that has nothing to do with the job that you're interviewing for.
Great, Nick. Thank you. And Jared?
For us, I think the biggest thing is we are really trying to bring tremendous value to the companies and businesses that we are working with. So being somebody that wants to bring that value, wants to put their desires that they have on the dairy first. I think it's very important to be a great listener, because sometimes when you get in a sales role, you can go in and talk about all the great things that your company can bring and the value that we have, but if you don't start the conversation with, just a discussion to figure out what is this dairy owner really truly passionate about, and then taking that passion and figuring out, yeah, we have to sell a product, right? But how are we going to meet your goals and whatever your passion is in our system? So just listening and really trying to meet the dairy where they're at the time is something that we are looking for. And we also realize that in any of our industries that we're in, there's competitors that can deliver a great product as well. So how are you going to differentiate ourselves and our group and yourself to really stand out? And I think that's just, for us, it's by just really bringing a wide range of impactful value to the dairy, because we realize anybody can drop off the product at the door and see you later, hope it works well for you. But it's the follow-up and the continuous support that we really want to bring. So hopefully that gives you a little idea of what we're looking for.
Thanks, Jared. And Rachel, how about you over at MILC Group? What are you looking for in your next hire? And how can these young people set themselves apart?
I have a little bit of a two-parter on this one, which is that when we're looking to hire people, we're definitely looking for somebody who is motivated to do that specific role. Within MILC Group specifically, I work in sales. We have a support team. We have an IT team because we sell software. We have a lot of different areas, and when I got hired on into my first sales role, and I again started in February, our CEO who hired me said, if this doesn't work out, I still want you on our team, so maybe we could try moving you to support. It has worked out very well, so I haven't had to make a change. I probably won't. But finding a company that wants to work with you, no matter what that role is really vital. And so the flip side and the second part to that is when we're looking to hire people, you also need to look at, do I want to work for this company? Do I want to work for these people? And so making sure that you're really looking into if several companies maybe are offering you jobs right out of college or whatever it might be, you really need to look back and think, okay, who did I talk to at this company? What did they bring to the table? What, like Nick said, what are the key skills or the key things that I would be doing there? Am I going to provide them with value, and vice versa? Are they going to provide me with a role that really fills my cup every day? And being able to really look inside and say, are those things all going to benefit me and the company equally to be able to get into those roles? And I think when you combine those things, you'll be able to find companies, find jobs, and then become a hiring manager one day that can find people to fill your team.
Oh, I hope you took notes, guys. That is some solid gold advice from the three of you, whether it's considering not just are you a good fit for the company you're talking with, are they a good fit for you? And what are they looking for to deliver that service, to be a self-starter, to be able to take things and run, and to be able to share what you're passionate about. And as we heard from the three of these individuals, sometimes the opportunities, well, more than often, those opportunities that you're going to have on a daily basis are going to be beyond what a job description said in the first place. So gold nuggets from these three on that, on these tips of what companies are looking for in their next hire. And the last question that I have for the three of you today, again, a lot of you are 4-H members and Junior Holstein members and breed association, involved with things in college. And what's going to happen in the next couple of years for you is that junior membership will be over. And you will then be into a different part of your life, a different stage of your life. So what opportunities are there for you to plug back in and to give back to many of the organizations and the groups that helped make you who you are? And that is something that these three also have more to share on. And so Rachel, I'll start with you with this last question that I have, and that is, how have you stayed connected and given back to some of the groups and organizations that influenced you?
Yeah, this is really, I love this question, Peggy, because I think there's a really important part to being a professional, being a leader, and that is giving back and also finding new ways to be involved, to learn, because things that you might be doing in your personal life really can contribute well to your professional life. And so I grew up in a family where my dad was my dairy judging coach, and so I always wanted to then become a dairy judging coach because I liked that my parent was my coach. So now I coach our county judging team, and that's one way that I really love to give back to both 4-H, and I help with our local FFA team as well. I also help coach with our county dairy quiz bowl. I assist my aunt. She kind of has a business where she teaches showmanship to kids across the country, and so I've been able to help put on those clinics, be able to teach kids how to show dairy cattle. And that is really exciting to a lot of kids. They'll come and it's their first time they're leading a calf. So doing those extra things, a lot of people too kind of forget about going to church, being involved in your local, a lot of people do like continuing education classes, things like that, to be able to give back to the youth in the area, but then also like making your friends, meeting new people within your communities. Those things are all really important.
Thank you, Rachel. And Jared, you?
Similar to Rachel, I've gotten involved with, now that I'm back in New York, involved with our local counties, dairy judging, and also just helping at the county show where I grew up, and it's kind of a full circle moment there where you can really give back to where you started. Something that isn't really related to this question that I feel like it's important that I want to bring up is that I learned from the CEO at Milk Source early on in my career. There is you don't need a title to be a leader. It doesn't matter if it's in your friend group. You are just starting out in a starter position at your new job. Really have that vision of being a leader no matter where you are or what you're doing, because that will really help you take off in your career if you are putting yourself out there, leading the people around you, even if you don't have that title of manager or I'm the leader of this group. You don't need a title to do that. So I just wanted to put that in there and end on that.
Thanks, Jared.
So I'm a part of a few different organizations, and we've talked about a little bit too, obviously helping out here at World Dairy Expo. It's a volunteering position that Rachel and I had yesterday. It was very, very fulfilling, and it has been for the last couple of years. Peggy mentioned I am the president for Red and White Dairy Cattle Association. I've been in that organization now for 5 years. I'm on the Holstein Foundation Board of Trustees. And I think it's really good to stretch yourself and find those different opportunities that are out there. But at the same time, know how far to stretch yourself, right? I think that's also another thing we don't talk enough about, is that while it's great to give back and you want to make sure that you're giving back in the right ways and doing as much as possible, also know your limits, because there's a point where you can do too much, and honestly, then it's not good for yourself. I think that the opportunities are vast out there, and it doesn't have to be all related to, agriculture, as Rachel was highlighting. There's a lot of things within your community. There's different shelters that Ashley and I volunteer at from a food security perspective. But honestly, just find anything that actually is a passion for you, right? What is it that, like Rich talked about, fills your cup, right? What is it that's really going to drive you to keep doing more and improve society. And I think that that's something we've kind of missed out as a nation here recently. But it's great to hear about different people that are doing things and just know your limits.
Thank you, the three of you. And Nick, thank you for just bringing in that level of reality at the end too, that as wonderful as it is to give, that we do have our limits with where giving can be a little bit too much and take away from something else. And thank you for just being able to share that. And so as the three of you have been sharing these pieces of wisdom today, and we have a few minutes left here before Mike's going to kick us all out, I had summarized what I was thinking would be the takeaways from this presentation, and I hope that you find them to be a good summary. So first of all, in the middle of your tables, there are some sheets of paper, and I want everybody to grab one. And this includes students and non-students. This applies to all. It also applies to my panelists. So we'll make sure we get you one of those as well in just a moment here. But what we put together was 5 pieces of wisdom that I hope you can take home from what Rachel and Jared and Nick have been so generous to share with you today. And I'm just going to walk through what these are. And so one of you, or some of you at your table, are going to get one that says this. You may feel the pressure to know the exact path and where it leads, but really, you don't have to. The right path will unfold as you take the next steps. And did you hear that today from these three? Did that come through? Whether it was Nick's path that at one point was to be a surgeon and then vet school, but truly opened up to a path that led to marketing. Whether it was Rachel's path that started in marketing, but now has her in her sweet spot, interacting with farmers and doing that every day. And the same thing with Jared too, the opportunities that's opened up for him. And sometimes we don't know, but that doesn't mean that it's not okay. So one of you will get that sheet at your table. Here's another one for you. It's okay to change your mind. We're giving you permission today, whether you need it right now, whether you need it 5 years from now. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to change your direction. It's okay to change your major. It's okay to change your job. It is okay. And another one, there's no wrong step as long as you are learning along the way. And I think we heard that today as well. And this one, going back to how we just were wrapping up, give back. And something that I always like to remind myself of is when I think about giving back, you are always best positioned to serve the person you once were. So think about, who were you 5 years ago? Who were you 10 years ago? Just as Rachel talked about helping out with dairy judging and dairy quiz bowl, just as others have shared the things that they give back to today, who are you best positioned to serve? And then this one, keep trying, stay humble, trust your instincts, and most importantly, act. When you get to that fork in the road, take it. This is a Maya Angelou quote, not a Pam quote. But, so I want to make sure everybody has one of these at the table. And like I said, even if you are not a student, make sure you have one because you're going to need it for these last couple of minutes. So does anybody not have one of these cards? Anybody short? Just my panelists. Might need a pen. So there should be pens in the middle of the table, and you should each have this paper. And before I tell you what we're going to do with it, I'm going to tell you one more story. One more story. I'm going back to my friend Tom. So, as you might be able to see, I look pretty excited in this picture. Believe it or not, Tom was actually pretty excited too. You might not see it in his face, but you can probably see it in mine. I was pumped. And let me tell you why. Because we've heard about the paths that Rachel and Jared and Nick have taken, but I didn't tell you much about my path. But this picture is a representation of my path. And so I'll give you a little snapshot of what that has been. So my background has been in agriculture communications, and most of that was spent as a magazine editor. And so Progressive Dairy, maybe some of you see that magazine around. That's where I spent almost 10 years of my career. And in that time, in those last couple of years while I was an editor for Progressive Dairy and loved what I was doing for a very long time, but started to get to a point where I knew that there was more. I just had this stirring in my heart that there was more. In fact, side note, I had started another business, and this young lady in the room over here, and the blondes, the cute little blonde over there, giveaway stuff, she was the first person that I hired to help me out with that business. An incredible young talent, marketer, that could write like me, that could talk like me, that could do social media posts and graphics the same way I would, and was just such an incredible find for that business that I had started. And so I had a little something stirring in my heart. And 3 years ago, I was out in Ohio at, where was I at? MVP Dairy. And so I kid you not, my drive from the airport to the dairy when I was out there, I had a job offer. The first one I had entertained in 9 years. An offer to do something else than what I was doing. And it was out of my mind. I knew I was ready for some sort of change, but I wasn't sure what it was. And so I get out to MVP Dairy, and it was the coolest thing. If you've ever met the 4 McCarty boys, Tom's sons, they were all at the dairy that day. And I had a chance to be in the room with these 4 individuals and their partners, the Van Tilburgs at MVP Dairy. And the energy and the drive and the passion in that room that day was unbelievable. And just getting to sit and be a part, like a fly on the wall, with these people in the room, it left me with 2 thoughts. Number 1, my next move will be to work for myself and not someone else. And someday, I want to meet their dad, and I want to interview him. So, 3 years ago. And that's when really I started to gather that vision for what my next step was going to look like on my own path. And mind you, podcasting didn't exist when I was a college student. So keep that in mind, that your next step may not even exist today, but it could develop into something in the future. Because what I did when I went home from that visit to MVP is I started to make a list. I started to write kind of my own job description, right? So think about like a business plan, but I started to write out a few different things. This list of, if I only did the things that I loved and the things that I was really good at every day, what would my day look like? And I went back to the good to great that we talked about over here too. What can I be the best in the world at? Or at least keep trying to be better and better at every day. And I made that list. And what came out of that list was, if I could talk to incredible people in the dairy industry every day, and they'd be kind enough to tell their stories, and I'd get to share them, and not just in a way that I would write the stories as I had been for the last 15 years prior to that, but in such a way that I could capture their voices and capture their words and share it with others, that would set my heart and soul on fire. And I could do that all day long. Well, I kid you not, almost a year to the date that I was at MVP was about the date that I got my last paycheck from the company and started my own official business with Up Level Dairy. And so that's where Up Level Dairy came from. And so keep going back to the vision, right? So part of that vision, when I started laying out, if I could do only what I loved every single day, what would I be doing? Who would I be talking to? Where would I be? Who would I be with? One of the things on that list 3 years ago was getting to meet this man. And so that list, writing that down, all happened last week. And in fact, Nick was with me in Kansas. He kind of made this all happen. He didn't know he was fulfilling a vision. He didn't know that all of the passion that I had for this visit. But this was last week, and I got to meet Mr. Tom McCarty. Woohoo! Woohoo! But I share all this with you with the hope that if there's one thing that I can personally leave you with today, it is the power of taking what is in your heart, connecting it with your mind, and putting it on paper. And I know that's a lost art in a world where so many of us write on our phones and take notes on our phones. And that's why you each have an actual piece of paper and a pen. And what I'm going to challenge you to do in the next few minutes, which we have sorry, Mike, can I get an extension? 5 minutes? What I challenge you to do in the next 2 minutes and take it home and work on more, is I want you to flip that paper over and grab your pen and do not stop writing. And here's a list of prompts. I want you to think about 5 years from now. If you did that same thing I did, and you wrote down, what sets your heart on fire? What would you be doing? Who are the people you'd be with? Where are the places you would go? What are the experiences that you would have? What are the things that set your heart and your soul on fire? The things that you could do all day long, without eating, without sleeping. Where's your true passion? And I want you, as you write down for the next 2 minutes, take off the guardrails. Because on this path, there are none. This is your permission to dream outside boundaries. And as you'll see, this paper's blank. And it's blank for a reason. Because this is just like the path that lies ahead of you. You get to write it, you get to direct it, you get to draw it out. And so, in these last couple minutes before they kick us out of this room, I want you to put your heads down and write. And this is, like I said, not just for the students, because none of us can stop dreaming in this room, right? All right, I see a lot of you are still dreaming, and I don't want you to stop dreaming, but I do know, out of respect to time, there's probably other things you gotta do today, and Mike's gonna kick us out at some point. But take that sheet home with you. Keep dreaming, keep writing. And my hope for you is that if you are a junkie for inspirational things to put in some special place and hang on your wall, that you're gonna take this home and you're gonna put it somewhere where you can keep looking at it. And you can turn around and remember what you dreamed about. And my hope and my belief is that somebody in this room, what you believe is gonna happen in 5 years will happen in the next 1 to 2. Because you wrote it down, and you thought about it, and you put your pen to paper. And when that happens, I want you to let me know. So, you've heard a lot about a World Dairy podcast today, and so gracious for these panelists that have talked about it, but this is where you can follow and find. So, if you're on Instagram, I would love it if you would go ahead, if you have any pictures from today, a picture of your sheet, a picture from the panel, and if you would be so kind as to share something that you took away from this seminar and tag up Level Dairy in that and National Dairy Shrine, Mike and I would be so grateful for the opportunity to have you share what you took away from these 3 incredible individuals and the time you spent in this room. And we hope that it's a gift that you can give to others as well. And also, I have another little gift for you today, and that is, if you didn't know this, I have another podcast that interweaves with Up-Level Dairy. It's called Up-Level Dairy Young Leaders. And I developed this about a year ago with the intention of creating something to serve people in the first 5 years of their dairy careers who are committed to being in dairy for their future and just wanted a place to plug in and connect and to learn from others on that same path. So I'd love for you to follow Up-Level Dairy Podcast, and then you can also get access to that to Up-Level Dairy Young Leaders. And so, with that, I'd like you to thank the most important people in this room today, Rachel, Jared, and Nick.
And let's thank Peggy as well. A couple things, why DLI Class 1? I'm old, right? And also, Good to Great, transformational book. Get your bus, get the right people on it, and drive it down. Thank you again for coming. Please grab an ice cream sandwich on your way out. And if you haven't put your name and email down on your way out, please do so that we can keep connecting and giving you great resources. Let's thank these guys again.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Up-Level Dairy Podcast Young Leaders Series. If you like this episode, please make sure to leave a 5-star rating or review. That allows us to keep the show going and growing and serving you. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and thank you for listening to the Up-Level Dairy Podcast.